Alright, we're going to do another, talk some more about data types here. Why are data types important? Well, because every data type is stored differently inside the computer's memory, and they're operated on differently. They work differently. So you have to know what data type you're dealing with so that you know how to operate on it. For numbers, you can do math. For words, you can't. Okay, so we'll get into that here. Because in this video we're going to talk about the string data type, which is just words, letters, characters, right? They are a string of characters. That's why they're called strings. So let's dive in. Here's how you declare a string. Okay, you create a variable, and then you set it to some value here with characters, letters, and they could even be numbers in here. It really doesn't matter. The only thing is that they are surrounded by quotes, okay, either single quotes or double quotes. Python doesn't really care. Other languages typically do. Python does not. So a quick word here on the verbiage. So when you have letters or whatever it is and it's all inside a quote, this is what's called a string literal, okay, because you are talking about the literal letters or characters between the quotations, okay. The opening quote and the closing quote. Though that is a string literal. So what I'm doing is I'm taking this string, this literal string of characters, and setting it equal to the value that I'll be referencing called my string. Okay. You can use, as I mentioned, single quotes or double quotes. It doesn't matter as long as whatever one you start with at the beginning has to be the one you end with at the end. End with at the end. Yes, that is redundant, but it's true. You can't do something like this, right? I have a double quote at the beginning and a single quote at the end. You'll notice my text editor here is saying, hey, that's a problem. And you can even see in the error message, it calls it the string literal, right? Because that's what it's called. The problem is that I used a different quote. And when I put the double quote at the end, you'll notice it says, oh, hey, everything's fine. Okay, so make sure that you are consistent. Whichever one you use at the end, or whichever one you use at the beginning of your quote, must be the same one that you use at the end of the string. You can mix and match if you want to. So I have this string here. I start with a double quote to open it up, and I end it with a double quote. So that's good. But inside, you can see I'm using another set of quotes, the single quote, and that's perfectly fine because the single quote here at the inside the string is not the same as the one I ended with, so Python says, oh, that one's fine, I'm looking for the double quote. As soon as it comes across the first double quote, then it's going to have, then it knows the string is done. Okay, and you can do it the other way around as well. So I start with a single quote, and then I have a double quote here. Python says, oh, that's fine, I'm not looking for a double quote yet. And then it finds the single quote, now the string is done. Okay, another option is you can escape the string. So something like this, you use the backslash, and that just tells Python while it's reading through the string, it comes across this backslash and says, oh, hey, something special is happening here, so don't freak out. It's basically what it's doing. In this case, I start with a double quote. Normally, if I had this double quote here, it would think that that was the end of the line, but since I put this backslash in front of it, then Python realizes that the next letter is supposed to be part of the string. It's not the end of the string. Okay? And I use another set right here, the backslash double quote. Python still recognizes that that is not the end of the string, and then I have the end of the string over here. Okay? And I'll kind of show you how this works. I'll print this for you. There it is. So you can see this uses, and then the same is in double quotes there. The same quotes throughout. Right? And you can do that with the single quotes as well. Again, Python really doesn't care which one is which, but if you're using single quotes as the beginning of the string and you want to use a single quote on the inside of the string, then you need to use this escape character so that Python sees this and says, hey, something special is happening, don't freak out. All right, and again, let's print this just so you can see what I'm talking about, and you'll know that I'm not actually making stuff up as I go along. There you go. Alright, we'll clear that out. So next, we're going to talk about, as I mentioned before, with numeric types. You can do math on them. You can add, subtract, divide, whatever you need to. With strings, they don't work the same way, okay? But Python has defined the addition operator, or the plus sign, which will work on strings. And what it does, instead of doing some computation on it and creating some really cool value like it would in for numbers, right, when you're doing math, it just adds the strings to each other one after another, right? It just creates a big long string. That word is called concatenation, right, or concatenating strings. It is a verb, so you can use the plus sign operator to concatenate or add multiple strings together. Okay, so here's kind of an example. I've got one string, and I've got I set that equal to this string literal here called first part, and then I have another string, and I use the other quotations just for fun, and that's another string called my string 2. And then what I'm doing here is I'm printing the first string. I use this little plus sign, and then I do the second string. Okay, what that's doing is it's taking the first one and then adding the second one on to the end of it. Okay, so let me show you what happens when I do that. There it is. So you'll see it gives you the first part, and then the second part is added right on after that. And you'll notice there's no space in between, and that's because I didn't put a space in here. If you wanted to, you could put a plus, right, and then a space, and then another plus sign. So what that's doing is it's adding 3 strings together. It's adding the first string, then it's adding this literal space, the string literal space, and then it's adding the second string variable. And let's see what happens when I run this. It should look a little cleaner. There it is, first part, second part. So you got to be careful with your spacing. Sometimes you'll need to add some spaces. Sometimes you don't. It really depends on what you're needing to do, but just keep in mind that you can do that. Another thing that Python does is it defines the multiplication operator with strings. You can multiply a string with an integer, and what that'll do is it will print or create that string. It'll concatenate that string that number of times, the specified number of times. So in this case, it's going to concatenate the first part, my string 1, right, 3 times. I could do that. It would concatenate it 13 times. And that's just the equivalent to doing like my string 1 plus my string 1 plus my string 1. Okay, and instead of having to type that out, you know, as many times as you need, let's say you needed to have 7 of them, right? It would just, it's very tedious. Let's say you needed to have 30 of them or 300 of them. That would just take a long time to do my string 1 plus my string 1 plus my string 1 forever and ever, you know, 300 times. In this case, you can just do my string 1 times 3, boom, or 300 or 3,000, however many times you need it, and super quick and easy. And I'll show you kind of what that does here. And there you have it. It says first part, first part, first part. There it is 3 times. Okay. Now, if you need to, you can add a new line inside the string. So let's say you want to have a full string or just one string variable, but you want it to have span multiple lines. Okay. So that's used. I mentioned this escape character earlier. There are a few that are predefined. The \n, lowercase n, will tell Python to continue printing on the next line. Okay, and that can be specified within a string. You don't have to do multiple strings and do anything special like that. You just have to put in this new line character. So Python will be reading that. It'll go, all right, print the F, print the I, R, S, T, space, blah, 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 blah. Gets to here and says, all right, before I start printing again, I need to jump down to the next line of output. And that's all. Okay, and so let me show you how that one's working. So there you see it, first line, and then it jumps down to the next line and prints the second line. If I were to take out this \n, then what it'll do is it'll just print both of those on the same line. There it is, first line, space, second line, right? So we'll leave that there. All right, and on the topic of the backslashes, let's say I needed to print an actual backslash in my text for whatever reason. Okay, you can do that by escaping to a backslash. It's kind of weird, it looks kind of funky and whatnot. But basically, if you need one backslash in your string, you have to type 2 of them. That's all. Because Python reads the first one as an escape character, so it escapes and says, hey, something special is happening, don't freak out. And then there's another escape, or another backslash, and it says, okay, this is part of the string, so it puts it back in. And yeah, that's it. So let me just kind of show you how it's printing. So there you have it. This is a backslash inside the string, right? Should be simple enough. Otherwise, there is another easier way here. If you don't like having to worry about doing a backslash there, or having extra backslashes or whatever you need to, you can do something. Python has this raw string format. Basically, what that does is it just, when you prefix your string literal, okay, remember this term here, string literal. If you prefix your string literal with a lowercase r, doesn't work with an uppercase r, to my knowledge. Lowercase r. It tells Python while it's processing the string to ignore any backslash characters. Okay, so you'll normally if this R wasn't here, it would see this backslash and say, okay, I'm escaping the string. Something special is happening. Don't freak out. All right, and then it's gonna look at this character and figure out what to do next. And then it's gonna move on and start after that. And in this case, if I want to put in a couple backslashes, I can just prefix it with an R, and then I only need to type 1 backslash. So I'll show you kind of what's happening here. There it is. This is my cool raw string, right? I have it actually prints the backslashes. I didn't have to do 2 of them. Okay, and that can be really handy for let's say you have some kind of a path variable, right? Path, and if you're on Windows, they use backslashes. Windows uses backslashes in the paths. So something like that might cause a problem because there's a backslash and then a U and then a backslash and an E, and Python won't know what to do because the backslash U might not be defined, or the backslash U, I think it is defined, but the backslash E is not defined, so it's going to freak out and not know what to do. But if you put this R in front of it, then you don't have to worry about going through and adding an extra backslash to each of those, which can be really tedious. Right, so you just add the little R for the raw string, and then Python knows to ignore all of those backslash, the escape. It'll ignore all the escape characters. Okay, so pretty simple. That can be real handy as well. I'm actually going to take out that line. All right, and I mentioned in the numeric data type video that I did that you can change the data types of the numbers, because in Python there's 2 numeric data types, and you can convert between them if you need to. You can do that for strings as well. Let's say you have a number type and you need it to be a string for whatever reason. Let's say you're writing out to a file, because files are always text. It's just characters. So when you're writing out to a file, you probably need it to be text. You can't have numeric data types. So what you'll need to do is convert your numbers to strings, perhaps, or when you're doing the string concatenation that I showed you up here, if you need to concatenate a number to the end of a string, it needs to be a string data type. It can't be a number, because Python does not know what to do with a string plus a number, but it does know what to do with a string plus another string. So in this case, you'll just do the same exact syntax, just you'll use str for string instead of int for integer, or float for float. In this case, you'll just use string. You'll cast it to a string type. So here I've got my integer. I set it to a numeric value because there's no quotes around it. Remember, if there's quotes, then it becomes a string type, a string literal. And then I'm taking my string from integer, right? Very descriptive variable name, by the way, and I'm casting it to a string, right, from my integer. And yeah, that's it. And it'll print. And then what that is, so now this variable holds the string representation of 123. Okay, so those are now, instead of being numbers 1, 2, and 3, they are the characters of 1, 2, and 3, just the text characters. Right? And you can also do that with something to this effect. You could print out just the string representation of that string, that float literal right there. Okay, that would work as well. So it doesn't have to be from another variable or anything, it's just any value can be converted to a string. So there it is, it's printing out, and I know it looks the same if I were to have done print, oops, I went the wrong way, 456.78. I mean, they're going to look the exact same. See, I mean, they look the same. Just from the output, you have no idea which one is the numeric type and which one is the string type. But they are under the hood and inside memory. They are handled entirely differently and represented entirely differently. So it's important to know what data type you're working with. This one here is the string data type. That's kind of just a quick rundown on what a string is, how it's used. There are tons and tons of more things you can do with strings, but I'm not going to go into those details. I'm just kind of giving you the basics on what a string is, how it can be used, and a couple quick tips and tricks on declaring strings and using them, converting, things like that. So I hope that makes sense, and yep, see you next time.